So as you can see by my job titles, I'm quite greedy with job titles. I'm the co-founder, CEO and creative director of 1.0 and 1.0 Industries, and I'm going to whistle through a tour of where 1.0 has been in the last sort of decade and a half and what we've done at this kind of convergence of art, design, creativity, technology, entertainment, and importantly how it's affected culture. But one of the things I passionately believe in is in order to progress we need to make something new. So I thought I'd show you something I've recently made. It's also a précis of the presentation. So it's my son Floyd, who's won on Friday. And when you make something as important as that, you start to value the kind of art of creation in some respects. And also there's another reason why I show that, and that's because people now feel more warmly towards me because they've seen a child giggle. Apparently that works very well. So I guess from day one, 1.0 started in the mid-90s, it was about convergence, and at the time they were talking about technology convergence. We were talking about the convergence of different creative disciplines. That's what really excited me, particularly about bringing different people together in one room, creating a kind of collision, if you like, an explosion, and then watch what happens afterwards. And hopefully they'll be on bungee jumps, bungee strings, and they come back together again, and we kind of keep watching them smash together. So 1.0 is quite hard to define, and maybe at the end of it you'll see why I need about 40 minutes to explain it. But this is one stab at it, and I guess one thing that we always end up doing is events, or we make an event of something through our festivals, through working with partners and creators and exhibitions. But I think the key thing for us is we've been working in the kind of digital cultural field for a long time, and I guess we're attuned to that subculture, or the layers of subculture that's attached to that. And my personal belief is if you can affect culture in a positive way, people will love you for it. And that goes for a museum, it goes for a brand, it goes for anybody. We've all got friends who knows what the best movie is and where to get it from. They have value to you because they kind of have the inside track. And interestingly, this mix between art and commerce, I think all through my career, and I won't talk about where I've been before, but that kind of grey area in between has always been exciting, and there's always been a tension in lots of places I've worked between kind of art and commerce, between suits and creative, and actually the thing in the middle is what excites me the most, and that's where the most of the interesting work comes, where you can't actually put your finger on it. And what do? We commission work, we curate work, we consult for brands and agencies, we develop things, we do a lot of education, and importantly we produce as well. So we're kind of quite rare in some respects in having that kind of mix of understanding audiences, understanding brands and marketing, but also understanding technology and creators. We started off life in '96, quaintly termed a digital film festival at the ICA. We showcase work from people like Michel Gondry, Spike Jonze, Jonathan Glazer, Tomato. People have then gone on to do bigger and more well-known things. And it was very interesting times at the time when technology became more available, particularly for motion, and we looked at non-traditional filmmakers, people coming from, not film, but coming from graphic design or new media, and see what they could bring to the language, if you like, of film. But try and also kind of this idea of bringing these creative disciplines and industries together in surprising ways. So the festival started at the ICA, spent 5 years at the BFI, and this is, I'll show you a little video clip now of what it was like. You had to have been there obviously, but this will give you a flavour of the mix of things that we do, and I'll talk a little bit over the video maybe. So this was the end of November 2011. And we take over the whole of the BFI. It's actually their busiest weekend, second or first busiest weekend of the whole year. We deal with the future people, of course, also known as children, or youth. There's lots of terms for them now, isn't it? Kids, can't call them that. And obviously there's a range of kind of visual stuff that we show on our screening programs, from music videos, animation, motion graphics, looking at kind of architectural stuff, music videos, work from all over the world. We do a lot of educational stuff, both with students, but also have panels and presentations and workshops. People like Wayne Hemingway kind of come to speak. We do a projection mapping workshop for about 30 or 40 people. So kind of hands-on experience, as well as kind of listening and talking to kind of peers and interesting people. And the idea is to kind of break down the audience and the speakers, so there isn't that kind of divide, and it creates a kind of a festival environment where people can talk and mix and mingle and have some drinks in a bar and party. And those social aspects for me are probably the most important bits, because that's when people get to meet and talk about what they've seen. So that's a small flavour of what a festival would look like. And I guess really this idea of forging collaboration is not just about between different creative disciplines, but also between different cultures as well. And that goes for geographical cultures around the world, but also for cultures within these kind of creative disciplines, because you do get these cliques within graphic design, within new media, within advertising, and it's trying to break that down a little bit to share each other's languages and goals and aims right out into cities itself. And I love this quote by Jean-Luc Godard because it makes me sound like I'm well-read and know about French cultural things. But it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to, and I think that can be applied to lots of things. And with 1.0, when we started the kind of festival, we didn't expect everyone to come to London. We thought we would take the festival out to the world. And it was a kind of new model of a festival, which is kind of why it's called 1.0. It's version 1.0 of something new. And not expecting everyone to come to you. So we took the festival on tour, as it were, and became a touring festival. So I think our busiest year in 2006, we hit 65 cities around the world. And that proves there's a growing and a global audience for this type of work. And what it meant for us is that we could use it as a kind of research point, but bring people from all over the world to all over the world and mix it up and make those connections and those networks, which is really important. And that international perspective is, I think, obviously now everything's connected and everything's online, but that real world international perspective is really vital and valuable, I would say. Our biggest event is not in London, actually. Our biggest event ever was in Buenos Aires in Argentina, which is a wonderful place if you like red meat and red wine, as I do. So it was high up on my list. In our first year, our partners there said, Shane, it's got to be, we've got to do something really big. This is Argentina. I'm like, great, okay. We only 20,000 people in the first year. I said, okay, that's a little bit more than London, but we can go for it. And we had 25,000 people in the first year. By the time the last event we did there was 50,000 people over a long weekend. And that's not a niche audience, that's a pretty mainstream audience. It had 6 pages in a national newspaper, 3 minutes on the national news, voted the best cultural event in that city each year. So it had a significant impact. Of course it had the hipsters and the people involved in the industry, but it had people coming up to be, dare I say, entertained, which is an interesting thing when you throw it into the mix of culture. People think of Kai culture, you need to go to a gallery, you certainly can't laugh and you don't smile in it. But why not? Mixing these things together, and I think entertainment is a very useful tool as well. And some of the most entertaining things are some of the most memorable things. So Buenos Aires was a big success for us. We took over a massive old nunnery in the centre of Buenos Aires. We built outdoor stages, indoor stages, and importantly, we didn't just bring international stuff there. We also had a local program going. So it became Buenos Aires' own festival. It wasn't a festival from London in Buenos Aires, which is really important. We've also worked in places like St. Petersburg in Russia, and they'd never had anything like this before, and this was in collaboration with a new 4G mobile phone network called Yotta. And we took over a 1960s department store that had been closed for 10 years in the middle of St. Petersburg. I must say it was minus 20 degrees, and there was no ventilation in this building, and everything was painted with bitumen paint black. There was no toilets, there was no food. It was absolute hell for me, but the results I think were quite nice, and I'll show you a short video of that, and you can see what I mean by how cold it was by the icicles. But interestingly, when you do stuff on an international stage, you do have to localize it to a certain degree. But equally, I think some things work all over the world. If you do fantastic, inspiring stuff, it should inspire the most hardened, cynical people, like the ones we have in London quite often, but also kind of a lot of Russians. So this whole space was designed and built by us. This was an interactive music video lounge. We had a number of installations throughout the building, some which were kind of immersive that you could literally walk through and into. This is a sort of 3D projection mapping immersive installation by NTVJ. It was quite Tron-like inside, actually. We showed some more screen-based installations for people like Quayola. And interestingly, because nothing like this had happened before in Russia, let alone in St. Petersburg, the audience didn't really know what to expect. So we had a really mixed and broad audience. Everything from, obviously, people interested in the arts, but also people's families coming and bringing their grandmothers. And I don't know if you know, Russian grandmothers are amazing, and it's always good to have them at your event. And I think the venue you put things in kind of changes the context to some degree, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if you put it into a kind of really high-class art gallery, it's already separating a certain constituent audience who won't ever go in there. You put it in an old 60s department store building, nobody has that kind of relationship with that building, so they feel open to go in and explore. And we had a huge outdoor stage as well built, and Hot Chip played live on the opening. And I think it was on for 2 weeks, had about 20,000 people. This is a photo booth by Cassette Player, who's a fashion designer, uses a lot of technology in her work. And we actually built an indoor cinema within this space as well. So when we say we do events, we do our own events and festivals, but equally we can plan pretty much everything to create the right environment for this kind of work. And I'm also really keen to kind of demystify this kind of art of digital as well. So we always do a lot of talks and panels, and this was introducing the audience, I guess, to what we call new creators and where they come from and where they're going to. So it's a series of presentations from a range of different designers, artists, creators. Minus 20 degrees outside. 6 people a year die in St. Petersburg from those icicles, apparently. So, you know, we're on the edge for this kind of work. So it's important for us not just to kind of showcase stuff, but also be a catalyst for new work and for that work to pass through us. And the best way to do that is to make it and also to commission it, and we do a lot of that. And in the past, we've also done a couple of TV series for Channel 4 called onedotzero, which is obviously quite old now, but it will be in a museum soon, I'm sure. We also commission and produce animation work, and this is a series we did for MTV Italia with a director called Richard Fenwick, and it was based around telling you how to do certain things, user guides.
Administering first aid. First aid is everyone's responsibility. Be prepared to react confidently and efficiently in either a life-threatening situation or a minor accident. Assessing the situation. What to treat first. Don't panic. You'll be able to assess the situation more effectively. Remember, psychological support is also important. Cuts and scrapes. Use a dressing to protect and cover cuts and scrapes. This will prevent further contamination. Handle only the edges of sterile pads or dressings. Severed body parts. Caution. Wrap the detached part of the body in something clean and send it to the hospital with the victim so that it may be reattached if possible. Bleeding. Act quickly. Have the victim lie down. Elevate the injury limb higher than the heart unless you suspect a broken bone. Control bleeding by applying direct pressure on the wound with a sterile pad or clean cloth. Penetrating objects. Caution. Do not remove penetrating objects. Get professional medical help from using electric shock. Separate the victim from the source of the electricity. This can be done safely by shutting down the source at the mains. If the power source cannot be located, then a rescuer should use an insulating material to pull the victim free without touching the electrical source directly.
You get the idea. So we actually did 10 of those based on different things, what to do in the event of a tsunami, nuclear attack, being attacked on the street, and worked with different illustrators and animators for each episode, all directed by Richard Fenwick. And the project came about because it was something, he made a short film for the festival. We thought it'd make a great series, and that was funded by MTV Italia. So in a way, it was coming from the creator rather than from the commissioner, and we went out and found finance to produce it. Other projects which are kind of very different again, this is Reimagine the City. We worked with the British Council, and it was done at the time when the world's population suddenly started living in, more than 50% started living in cities. So about 2006, 2007, And the British Council wanted to promote this idea of the creative city around Southeast Asia. So we planned this project in 12 cities in 9 countries, very different countries, I think from Vietnam to Australia, Indonesia, Korea. And we basically got a team called Diffuse to drop them into a city and hook them up with local artists and designers. And Diffuse an audiovisual unit, and they're going to do a live audiovisual performance, but they had to go and record and film the city in a way with external viewpoint, but with insider knowledge. And within a week, they'd come back and prepare this live AV kind of performance. We had lots of panels talking around the role of artists and creators in the developing city. And bear in mind, 2 million people at that time are moving to cities across that region every month. So incredible change in these cities. And the collaboration, I think we collaborate with about 200 people across the region. The idea was also to build their own networks. So you had people in Bandung, Indonesia, knowing people in Seoul, who knew people in Melbourne, who knew people in Ho Chi Minh City, and trying to create that creative network for themselves. And it was quite a successful thing, and it was really about kind of leaving a legacy behind for them to develop their own area and thoughts about how the city can evolve and develop. So kind of, in a way, quite kind of strategic, but using kind of audiovisual culture, if you like, to kind of get to a greater point. This is another project we did, which was about new talent. It was with MTV. And MTV, when I was growing up, was an amazingly radical new way to do broadcast design. Their logo was always different, but always the same in some ways, a really vibrant animation, but also about new talent. And now they're a huge kind of company across the world. The international creative team felt like they kind of lost their way a little bit and weren't attached to this kind of new growing area. So we devised a competition called Bloom, where 10 winners from across the world had to submit a treatment for a 1-minute film which says more about where they're from than a stereotypical viewpoint. They would get a proper budget from MTV, which we would manage, we would help them produce the film. And then we would also, that content would then go across 120 channels worldwide on MTV. So this was in direct opposition to a lot of brands saying, I've got a competition for you guys, make a film, if we like it, we'll show it. It's like, where's the kind of commercial or cultural transaction in that? The people are making something for nothing, and then you're making a lot from it by using it. This is really integrated. So MTV obviously they got content, they got to meet new talent, they got to sit to recognize us as supporting this area, and the talent themselves, they got paid, they got experience, and they got massive exposure. So it was a really successful project for, you know, not very much money. I think about £100,000. And bear in mind how much content hours that goes across all those channels worldwide. We had a launch event where we put the participants up there in front of the media, so they got very well out of it. I think 3 of them worked with MTV afterwards. Another 3 got signed internationally. Another 2 went on to do further MA studies in the area. And this is one of the films. From Beijing, I'll show you a short clip. Now bear in mind that was that person's second piece of moving image work they've ever made. So they got really good results, and one of the challenges we had, some of the competition entries were really, really strong from, I would say, properly professional people midway through their career. So the temptation was, yeah, let's just give them the money and then we'll guarantee great results on screen. But we had to kind of really limit it to people who really had very little experience. And I think the value in that was tenfold, really. Because it really did help the individuals, and MTV still got great content. The other thing I'm interested in is stuff actually not on the screen, and this idea of installations and interventions into the public realm, outside in the streets. Don't look outside now. And that kind of idea of sort of scale as well is very interesting, and responsive and interactive work. When we were 10, we got offered to do a Friday late at the V&A, just down the road. And I thought, amazing, they're giving me the keys to this amazing building, so what can we do? And we used the biggest footprint possible for a Friday late. Normally it's just on the ground floor, so we used upstairs. We used the garden for the first time for a Friday late. And we commissioned 20 different people to respond to the collection and spaces of the V&A. And my idea really was to show the V&A as this great design museum and bring a new audience to it, our audience that we might deliver, and highlight. So we'd have things in the sculpture courtyard, which were interactive sculptures. This was a music box in the music room, for example. I'll show you a very low-res video of that evening. And normally there we've got 2,000 to 3,000 people at the time, and we nearly got 6,000 people in 4 hours for a Friday late. So it was the most successful, still to date, 5, 6 years later, 7 years later, it's still the most successful Friday late ever. And because all of these installations are spread out throughout the museum, you had no choice but to see and explore the museum. We have pieces from Jason Bruges, and you... One measure of success, the bar was drunk dry twice and it was over by 8:30. So if that's your barometer of success, we did quite well. And this juxtaposition between this old world, if you like, craft and design technology with the digital stuff, I think was very successful in showcasing the V&A and also these new creators coming up. It was the first time they used the garden for anything like this, and this was a piece by UVA I'll talk about in a minute. It's Matt Pike from Universal Everything. There was even dancing, believe it or not. And it was great for me because suddenly we had this other playground to play with, and we had lots of discussions with the V&A about what we can and can't do. And we did all of the technical everything because they didn't really have anyone there. They had one guy who knew where the plug sockets were at the time, and that was the level of technical support. So all of the creators had to also get behind it, and I think that's why it proved to be such a big success, because it was a bit of a community kind of showcase in some degree. This was UVA's first public installation, and we did it in the courtyard of the V&A because I've always loved that space. And I said to them, you know, we're going to do something outside. They said, well, no, you can't, it's winter. I'm like, well, it's amazing. Yeah, I know, but people won't go out there, it's too cold. Anyway, we did do something with UVA. Again, this is quite a low-res video. And this was a piece called Monolith, which was a very simple piece of LED. We had to cordon off the people that wouldn't come outside because there was too many of them. And for me, this is a really great illustration of what I think is one of the holy grails of interactive work, where there's no instructions and it's intuitive to use. Very, very simple. You approach it, it responds and reacts to your presence visually, but also sonically. And that sound really hit you in the middle of the chest, and suddenly you looked at this inanimate piece of hard technology and it became as if it was alive. And of course it lit up this amazing courtyard as well. So that juxtaposition between the architectural environment and that piece of work was very, very strong and proved to be a success. And indeed the V&A went on to commission UVA to do Volume, which was a massive piece for 3 months in that very space. And now they regularly do courtyard commissions around new technology. This was a follow-up we did with UVA in Paris, and this is called Triptych, and it was 3 pieces of LED, and it was done for Nuit Blanche, which is the whole of Paris is open from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. and there's installations throughout the city. And I think on this particular evening there was 2 million people wandering the streets of Paris. The French were in the Rugby World Cup final, but I'm sure it's because of Nuit Blanche as well. So there was a lot of competition on the streets. And because it's run by the Mayor's office, we could turn off all the lights in the area, and this was outside the Cultural Ambassador's Palace next to the Louvre. So an amazing opportunity to kind of control the environment of the city, but again having these architectural things around. And this time we commissioned sound from Matthias Kispert, and this 3 pieces of LED became this huge playable musical instrument for audiences to enjoy. And we had to obviously limit the numbers of each time. But again, very intuitive. It worked for everyone from young to old. And I always tell the story of this older gentleman saying, well, you know, what is this rubbish? And as he did that, he got a response. Half an hour later, we're trying to drag him off as he was orchestrating the whole space. Jason Bruges, who we worked with on that Friday late, this was a project called Winter Light. We were approached by Architecture Week to do an installation around the theme of sustainability, and obviously a lot of the things we do involve power, and we commissioned this from Jason Bruges, and it's basically harvesting the power of the wind to drive little mini wind turbines, which are on top of rods that have LEDs inside, and it generates just enough power to light it up. So it illustrates the idea of this power being around us and sustainability in a very effective and simple way. And it was supposed to be up for a week, and it stayed up for 3 months because it was so successful. So successful, in fact, people stole between 50 and 100 of them. But it did generate a new product actually with Matmos as well. But I love the way it's very poetic, the way it visualizes the wind, and it's very kind of simple addition to the urban landscape as well, and how you can use the kind of space outside as your canvas, as it were. Really, I think, illustrated Jason Bruges' kind of philosophy about reuse and recyclability and sustainability in their work, even though you wouldn't know it from the outside. Now, the V&A, off the success of that Transvision, that Friday late we did, I originally went to the V&A sort of 5 years prior to that to say we should do an exhibition. I'd love to get some digital work within the V&A. Anyway, a few years later, off the success of the Friday late, we managed to have that conversation properly, and we collaborated with the V&A to do Decode, which was the first proper digital show in the contemporary galleries. I don't know, anybody go to see Decode? A few people missed it. It had their target for the show was 40,000 people. It was a paid-for show, as in entry paid for. We got 100,000 people, so it more than doubled their expectations. It had a number of firsts attached to it, and when we worked with them, I was keen to sort of not just be a curator, but 1.0 to properly collaborate and work with all the different departments. As crazy as that is, I realise now, because it's a massive old institution, it's like working, well, it is like working with the government to some degree. So we work with the security teams, the educational teams, the archiving, the conservation. Really, really interesting to try and get them to think differently about what a museum could be. Because when you go into a museum, you can't touch anything, you can't take any photographs. With this, it's like you're encouraged to do all of those things. And it was the first time ever they had a blogger's preview. First time in their 150 years they had a moving image identity for any show they've ever done. It was actually a generative identity that you could download, remix yourself, and upload again. And that was chosen by us, the winners, to then appear on the CBS screens across the rail network, which was also part of the exhibition. So not just in the gallery. We projected on the outside of the building, had installations throughout the V&A, had a digital weekend, had a symposium. So a kind of massive kind of rethinking of what you can do. And my main argument was, this is a digital show, but you should do this with everything. Now, whether they've learned that or not, I don't know. This is a flavour of some of the work that was there, a very short clip. So there was a lot of generative work. There was a lot of work which was interactive and responsive. The idea of using a network and crowdsourcing. But the fundamental thing about this show was trying to let people know there's this new raw material in town called code. And today's creators and artists are sculpting that raw material into all these amazing pieces of work. And it allowed the V&A to talk about their prior collections in digital work. And they've been collecting digital work since the 60s, albeit prints and stuff. So it was very successful in terms of visitor numbers, very successful in lots of other ways, in marketing, and won awards for all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the art press, if you like, one of the criticisms was it was like, it can't really be art or anything like that because people were having fun in the gallery. Because you were allowed to touch things and interact. And that idea of performance within that space, I think, actually gives you a deeper understanding of the work and actually makes you more connected to it. And I think audiences nowadays are kind of looking for those types of experiences, if you like. We've commissioned lots of work over the years. This is an interesting one we did for our own festival, which was our identity. And briefly, it was done with Wyden and Kennedy, and I kind of challenged them to think differently and think digitally, and they teamed up with Carsten Schmidt, a creative coder. And all of these words are taking live feeds from the internet when anyone mentions 1.0, on Facebook, on Twitter, on blogs. And it's fed through this algorithm system. We can change the angles with the software, and we can write words with it. And essentially we can freeze frame it and grab a still for our promotional material. We can record it as we have done here to do a moving image identity. And equally when we tour, all these strands will say different things in different languages because everyone can engage and interact with it. It's about harnessing our our community literally to feed our identity for that year's festival. And that was all open source, and you can download it and remix it and change it yourself as well if you wanted to. This was a lovely piece by Johnny Lemercier, and everyone's heard of projection mapping. This was a project we did, jog it forward, which he actually drew by hand this kind of landscape, very flat landscape, and it's projection mapped on top to create this kind of installation. And it was at the time of the Icelandic volcano, which I won't try to even say the name of. So I just call it volcano, but it's actually called the name of the volcano. This is a piece by Quaola. And he takes, with this particular piece, he's basically taken and analysed very classic paintings by Tiepolo, etc., and analysed the kind of the geometric structure, the colours, and using coding and game engine to reinterpret that painting in motion to create a kind of new piece of work in a way. He acts almost as if like a excavating or an archaeologist through that work. And he was actually part of the MTV Bloom project we did many years before. And he's now showing in major art shows in Miami and in New York. This is a piece by Helican Lewis, which was for the Roundhouse in Camden, and they had a show, Circus Fest, and we wanted to do something around the idea of performance. So this, in a way, is almost like taking on the fairground mirror kind of thing. So there was this interactive point inside, but it also fed screens within the venue, and also outside of the venue you could see it, as you'll see in a second in this video. But because Circus Fest was about performance, we wanted the audiences to also perform. So it appeared on the outside of the building, unbeknownst to the people inside, I think. And also you could go and visit the website and you can generate your own animated GIF of yourself as well if you work out the time. So a few commissions. Now we've also gone into other areas. We've done a lot of work in rock and roll, or the music industry. And for me, you know, there's nothing more mass entertainment than I don't know, someone like George Michael, for example. And we worked with Willie Williams, who's the lighting designer here, and we did, what George is standing on there was the biggest LED screen in Europe at the time. It was a ski slope of a screen. And we worked with Jason Bruges to develop a system, and then we commissioned visuals around it, so it was interactive to his movement and also sound. So this will give you an idea. So as George moves, the visual content moves with him as well. Now this is in the middle of Wembley Stadium, a pretty mainstream concert venue, pretty mainstream act, doing something I think quite interesting. And the context suddenly shifts. You do it in the V&A and it becomes, you discuss it about being art or art and design. You put it here and people don't think about it in that way. And nowadays when you go to concerts, you kind of expect that visual accompaniment to some degree, certainly with the big acts as well. And I love watching sort of fan videos on their phones when you do shows like that, because that's when you get it's not when Bono walks out, it's when something happens visually, they go, oh wow, and their cameras come out, you know, and you get the wavy footage. One of the first shows we did was with U2 for Vertigo quite a few years ago, and we helped develop these pixel LED curtains, again with Willie Williams, and commissioned people like Julian Opie, well-known British artist, but also students to make content for the show. Very, very low resolution. Don't worry, I won't show you too much of Bono. And UVA worked on this in terms of developing an interactive system to drive the visuals around this space. But to me it looks like a huge interactive installation. It happens to be for U2 in the middle of a massive global tour. And this is to show you some of the low resolution graphics that we made and generated. And it really used our curatorial ability to kind of commission out or curate loads of creators to make different content for parts of the show. We've also been very interested in trying to disseminate this work in different ways. And if you cast yourselves back a few years ago, if you watched anything move online, it was very rudimentary. If you wanted to watch video, it was very small. So the idea of actually, if people couldn't come to our festival to see it and they wanted to re-watch the kind of work we did, was let's do a DVD. Do you remember those round things that people put in machines? So we did a DVD label, and it did very well. It was distributed worldwide. We've also done books around the subject, trying to demystify this creative process and get a little bit closer to the creators with sketches and work in progress. And it wasn't about the latest work, it was about the broad body of someone's piece of work. It's about 30 maverick moving image makers in motion blur. And then we did another one, because the first one did so well, Motion Blur 2, imaginatively, which also comes with a DVD. And you can still buy it now for your collective showcase in your bookcase. We also do a lot of educational stuff, and I think there's one constant in life, and that's change, and that's accelerating to a huge degree now, I think, particularly with these digital tools and culture that we're surrounded by. And I've been talking on lots of educational things about kind of the role of education and advising courses, and I always found education very slow, as an institutionally very slow, for lots of reasons, valid and invalid. And we work in education in lots of ways. We advise courses, we do workshops, we obviously show graduates and students work. But we also developed this platform called Cascade, which was really about kind of the idea of convergence and collaboration and teaching people at college to how to learn each other's languages and mix with people not from their own course. So we took 40 graduates from 15 different disciplines, all from different universities, forced them literally into teams of 5. So you might have a graphic designer with an interaction designer, with a fashion designer, an interior designer, an architect, etc. They have to brand themselves. This is all within a week. They have to answer a brief, and every day someone comes in to inspire them and work with them. So we might have a creative director of an ad agency, we might have an individual artist, may have a designer, may have a design studio, may have someone from The Guardian talking about new media. And it's very interesting when I get people to come and talk for free to these students, because it's always a bit of a struggle, you know, they're busy. And then when they do turn up, they don't want to leave and they want to come back the next day. Because the atmosphere is amazing, it's very electric. And really it's about giving them a stepping stone to what happens next, and building their own personal networks and understanding that actually it's about collaboration, and they come away well armed to what they do in the future, whether they want to work in advertising or as an individual or start something or carry on working as the same group. So you can see 1.0 wasn't created as a neutral showcase kind of event of the festival. It's really about kind of being this visual ideas lab, and also kind of being about this kind of petri dish for digital culture, bringing all these disciplines together. Some people call it art, some people call it design, some people call it advertising, some people call it lots of different things. I think really it's about culture and those mix of things that I'm excited about. And it is driven by technology, but it's really about the creative application of technology that's the most interesting thing. We've also been working with brands and agencies, and I'll show you 3 examples of something we've done in the last sort of 6 to 8 months. And using our curatorial ability and our network to deliver slightly different events for people. So Google Campus launched last year in East London. Google, obviously, if you have never heard of them, you can Google it. They're a technology company. The agency that were doing the kind of launch party went for the standard music, booze, food, but it doesn't make sense for them as an organization. So we curated a whole floor of digital installations to kind of break the ice and be a fun place as a starting point. But we did a little bit more than that, actually, right across for them. So we curated the little screening hubs, little screening rooms around a particular theme. And it's a strange one because it was about launching a building. So you want to showcase the building and not hide the building. So we had things like this interactive swing by a French group. And all these things, you put them in a gallery, they mean something else. You put them in a party, and it really gets the party mood going. So this was something we commissioned for the thing. The theme was around space, in case you hadn't got it. And we did all the lighting for the whole building, organised the music and visual entertainment. That's Vint Cerf, who founded the internet. And then they actually launched a real rocket within the courtyard in the middle, against my better judgment and my advice. But I think it's a way to use our network and our experience to really help something kind of kick off in the right way, rather than going, okay, it's nice music and I've got some food and a drink and I'm going to wander around this building. They actually went round and it really stimulated debate and conversation, and people come away going, that was amazing, that was a great night. Isn't Google a great company? Isn't this a great building? This is something that we did for Acer. They were launching 7 touchscreen products. They were inviting 400 international journalists to London. This video is running a bit clunky for some reason. So we built this mini version of Decode almost in the Science Museum. It was on for 1 day, an audience of 400 people, and we designed the whole space, and we had 7 interactive installations around touch as a theme or tactility, which linked into their individual products. So rather than just showcasing the products, people could also experience this idea of digital tactility as well. So this was a lovely sand pit. When you create a space, little things grow within it. So it's generative fish and things. You can cover it up and make it smaller. And this is essentially a playable wall you can use by pushing in the fabric. Wish I had one here to show you, but. And as they went through all of these installations, and obviously they learned a bit about the products at the time, they go through another section which was more like a kind of tech cafe where the real products were there, experts were there, a stage, the CEO gives an opening talk. But already people are more engaged with their products, they're more engaged with the world of touch and interactivity. And lastly, one last video, something we did for Intel, which was Power Up, which is a DJ competition. And they asked us to do a video backdrop, and we did something a little bit more than that. And this was in an old arch in Shoreditch, and we built a responsive, interactive, infinity installation as a backdrop, which responds to each DJ in the competition's music. And those infinity mirrors meant that the visuals went on forever. So from a very limited budget and from their limited brief, we developed it into something much, much larger, and ended up that being the main kind of PR driver for their story, not the winning DJs, but the fact they collaborated with 1.0 and did this amazing installation. And the kind of viral impact of people taking pictures of that was obviously massive, because a guy like that, and it was all guys, DJing is not that interesting. So it became a much, much bigger thing for them. This is something I find very amusing to myself, because we started in the 1990s, we're now in the next century, so we've been doing it over 2 centuries. And this is a quote we got recently, a couple of years ago, from The Guardian. Keeping abreast of developments in digital moving image now beyond the capacity of the human brain, but somehow this festival consistently managed it. Perhaps it's run by a supercomputer in China, which sounds amazing, but it's, the reason why I show that is it's run by a very, very small, dedicated team. And the only reason why we can do all these things all over the world is because we collaborate with lots of partners and we have an amazing network. And that idea of collaboration can take you much, much, much further. That's it. Thank you.
Brilliant. About